So let's dive in to Week 9's prelude. As we again are starting with the new top 25. This was Week 8, and what we had for that 25 on that list. This is the new and improved top 25 going into Week 9. As you can see, we have 4 new teams coming in, a few that are actually coming back into the top 25, and 4 that have left the list. The 4 that are out from last week starts with Utah, who lost to BYU 24-21 there in Provo. Memphis, a disappointing loss and the upset of the week as they go down to Birmingham, Alabama and lose to the Blaze 31-24. Nebraska, probably the most embarrassing loss this past weekend. They go to Minnesota and lose to the Golden Gophers 24-6 on a Friday night. And the final team out of the top 25 is UNLV. They get shellacked on the blue turf of Boise 56-31 against the Broncos on the road. The new teams here in the top 25, you see them there at 21, 22, 23, and 24. That is Virginia, who's in the top 25 for the very, very first time here in 2025, and I think the first time ever on our top 25 list of any kind. Oklahoma is back in the top 25. They're at number 23. Notre Dame is in at number 22, and good old ASU, the Sun Devils, with a nice big win at home against Texas Tech, gets them there at number 21. But like we do every time, let's start with number 25 and then move down that list. Navy, who had a bye this past weekend, they will be playing FAU this upcoming weekend. Virginia, we just talked about them. They just beat Washington State in a nice comeback win there in Charlottesville, 22-20 against the Wazoo Cougs. They are going to be going to Chapel Hill to take on the North Carolina Tar Heels. Oklahoma, they just beat South Carolina in Columbia 26-7. They have a very, very big game at home there in Norman against Ole Miss. Notre Dame, they just beat the crap out of USC 34-24. The Fighting Irish have a nice bye after that rivalry matchup there in South Bend. Number 21, Arizona State beats Texas Tech and hands the Red Raiders their first loss of the season there in Tempe, 26-22. Sun Devils will be taking on Houston, also in Tempe, this upcoming weekend for Week 9. Number 20, moving up into that 20 spot, is Texas. They get out alive in Lexington, Kentucky. They beat the Wildcats 16-13 in overtime. They will be heading to Starkville, Mississippi to take on Mississippi State. 19 is Tennessee. They suffer their second loss of the season in Tuscaloosa. 37-20 is the final score between them and Bama. They'll be playing Kentucky on the road in Lexington here in Week 9. 18, another team that lost here in the top 25. That is LSU. They dropped from 11-18. 31-24 is the end result between them and Vandy. They have a big matchup in Baton Rouge at home against Texas A&M. So it's a top 25 matchup there. 17, Tulane. They beat Army 24-17. They still have just the one loss on their record. They will have a nice bye for the Green Wave in Week 9. Illinois, they benefit from a bunch of teams losing, and this is our highest ranked 2-loss team in the country here at your Sports Outpost, as they again benefit from not playing a game. They will be playing Washington in Seattle here this weekend. Cincinnati, they blew out Oklahoma State in Stillwater 49-21. They take on Baylor at home as the Bearcats get down with the Waco Bears. 14 is USF, which would have been a big matchup this upcoming weekend for them. We already talked about Memphis falling to UAB. But for the Bulls, for week 8, they beat FAU in a nice beatdown there in Tampa, 48-13. And again, they will be taking on the Memphis Tigers there on the road here in week 9. Miami, they suffered their first loss of the season as they hosted Louisville and go down 24-21 to the Cardinals. They have another home game against Stanford this upcoming weekend. Number 12, Georgia Tech. They move from, I believe, 16 to the 12th spot. 27-18. They beat Duke, and they'll be taking on Syracuse this upcoming weekend. Number 11, Texas Tech, who is another team that is no longer undefeated. 26-22. They're on the road against the Arizona State Sun Devils. They will be taking on the Cowboys of Oklahoma State. They're in Lubbock, Texas. Number 10, Vanderbilt. Well. They are in the top 10. They get past LSU at home in Nashville, 31-24. That's what happens when you know how to run the ball. They have another top 25 matchup. To be more specific, it's a top 10 matchup. They will be facing the number 9 team, Missouri, who is again number 9. The Tigers survive in double overtime on the road against Auburn. And I believe it was 23-20. I have 23-10 for some reason in my notes. Regardless, they win in double overtime. And again, they take on the Commodores there in Nashville. Number 8, Ole Miss. So many undefeated teams that took their first L in that column. And that was the Rebels on the road in Athens, Georgia. They lose 43-35. And again, they are on the road once more in Norman, Oklahoma, to take on the Sooners. They're on the Palace on the Prairie. And that's going to be another tough matchup for Lane Kiffin and company. Number 7 is BYU. They get past their in-state rival, Utah, 24-21. They are back on the road against Iowa State there in Ames for week 9. Number 6, we just talked about them, Georgia, who just passed the Ole Miss test, 43-35. They just wanted it more, plain and simple, and now are rewarded after that big win with a nice bye. Oregon, they went to the East Coast and whooped Rutgers 56-10. Not even close. It was over at halftime. And this upcoming weekend will most likely be over before halftime. That is a battle with Wisconsin there in Eugene. Number 4, Alabama. Talked a little bit about them beating Tennessee 37-20. It was Bama all the way, and they will be going all the way over to Columbia, South Carolina to take on the Gamecocks. Texas A&M, they survive in Fayetteville, 45-42 against the Razorbacks. They will be back again on the road in Baton Rouge to take on number 18 LSU in a top 25 matchup here in week 9. Number 2, Ohio State. a shutout win against Wisconsin there in Madison, 34-0. And now they are rewarded with a nice bye going into this weekend. And then the final team to mention here in the top 25, that is the number one program here at your Sports Outpost for a second time in a row, and that is Indiana. 38-13 win against Michigan State in Bloomington. They will also be back at home against UCLA here for week 9. And that is the new top 25 going into week 9 here at your Sports Outpost. Let us know who we left out, who we should not be having here in the top 25. And yeah, pretty good stuff. The last couple of weekends going into Monday, we've been getting ready to show you some cool bracket stuff. This was the first bracket from week 7's results. Actually, no, this one I think was actually from last week, if I'm not mistaken. Regardless, doesn't really matter. This is the one from week 8. As we've been doing some hypothetical brackets, this is the one from week 7. And going into week 9, here's the new and improved bracket of a hypothetical playoff if the season ended after this past weekend. And in that number 1 spot, going to Indiana, they are in the Orange Bowl. On the number 2 spot, that would be the Rose Bowl representative in Ohio State. The number 3 spot goes to Texas A&M, who would play in the Sugar Bowl. And in the Cotton Bowl, it would be Alabama, the new number 4 team. Not only here at your Sports Outpost, but technically in the AP pool as well. And that takes us then into the first round games, which start with Oregon, who would be hosting USF, the new group of 6 representative, as Memphis gets their first loss of the season. So now USF moves finally into that slot, and that would be an interesting contest between the Bulls and Ducks. A game in Athens, which would be the number 6 school. Well, that is Texas Tech and Georgia. We would love to see this one between the Red Raiders and the Bulldogs. Mississippi, Ole Miss would then be hosting a game. The last couple of weekends, they have had that bye in our hypothetical brackets. They would be playing Missouri out of our top 25. And the final game would be BYU and Vanderbilt. Interesting game there, as now the Cougars would be hosting a first round game instead of Texas Tech. Imagine a playoff game in Provo, Utah. That would be some good stuff. Out of this hypothetical bracket, this is who we think would get out of that first round and all the way to the final. The Rose Bowl would be most likely Oregon and Ohio State, which would be a nice rematch there from last year's quarterfinal game. Georgia, Texas A&M would most likely be that matchup in the Sugar Bowl. I think the Bulldogs get past the Red Raiders. Indiana most likely would play Ole Miss. But that game between the Rebels and Tigers would most likely be a nice coin toss. So it can go either way. BYU is who we think would survive there against them and the Commodores. Well, at BYU, they're in the Cotton Bowl versus Alabama. That would be some good stuff. As we continue through that next round, we would pick again Ohio State in the Rose Bowl to do the double against Oregon there. Georgia, we would think get the best of Texas A&M in the Sugar Bowl, and that would be a absolute delightful meeting in the Fiesta Bowl between the Georgia Bulldogs and Ohio State Buckeyes. That goes back to, I believe, the 2022 playoffs. All those years ago, I was a CJ Stroud, Stetson Bennett going at it. This time around would be Julian Sayin and Gunnar Stockton in the Fiesta Bowl there. In the other side, we would have Ole Miss and Indiana there in the Orange Bowl. We will definitely take the Hoosiers. And in the Cotton Bowl, Alabama, BYU. Well, we got to go with Bama, which sets up a nice Peach Bowl between the Hoosiers and Crimson Tide there. But ultimately, between the 4 teams in that semifinal, we're going back to what we have been doing the last couple of weeks and picking Big Ten teams and having an all Big Ten championship game there in Miami at Hard Rock Stadium. Who would win it all? Ooh, that's a good coin toss. This game would basically be a rematch of the possible Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis. And yeah, we could see that again here. Somewhat, kind of, not really when we think about it, because rematches of conference titles, it's going to be a little bit harder, as these two teams would be on the opposite side of the brackets. But I think it would be a great matchup once again. We would probably get some great close games earlier on in December, and then in mid-January have another rematch there between them two, who would have really truly earned their positions if they would get through this gauntlet. Indiana beating Ole Miss and Alabama, that would help out stop the naysaying that Indiana doesn't really play anyone. Beating Ole Miss and Alabama, that would definitely put them on the map. And then Ohio State going through Oregon, who they don't play this season on the regular schedule, and then getting one back on Georgia from a couple of seasons ago now, or maybe a couple more now, actually, when I think about it. But yeah, that is our hypothetical bracket from this past weekend. Let us know of who you would be picking out of it, as there's a nice visual for you to start with, and who would end in that title game.